customer of the Aquarion Water Company. I commend them on how quickly they fixed the break outside my home a week or two ago with all that brown water flowing down Main Street. With respect to a couple of the points that were made, I wasn't asked when Aquarion sold to Eversource. Maybe if I were an investor in BlackRock, I might have had a say. But the customers in either Hull, Hingham, or Cohasset weren't asked. It's a delight to see a full-blown proposal with respect to the choices available to us as customers and as citizens of Hingham to determine where our future lies in terms of the ownership of this asset, as well as in terms of how we want it to be governed and who people should be responsible to. With respect to the assets, it's not just the number of customers. From a business perspective, the reason why this is such a desirable investment is because it's essentially a monopoly, which is great. The assets we get are the franchise, so we end up controlling all of that. It's not like we're stepping into the shoes of Aquarion. This isn't a merger or a stock acquisition, it's an asset purchase. And there'll be a new sheriff in town with new priorities, new operational control. Among the assets are tens upon tens of thousands of acres of critical conservation property now owned by Aquarion, including 50 or 60,000 acres of Ackert Pond, the source which in the early 1880s, when the town decided it didn't want to take a flyer on something as novel as trying to pump water from Ackert Pond down to Hingham Square. And for God's sakes, what would you do with all the snakes that would come in the pipes? These are the debates in the history books that were mentioned. Well, we're well past that. But when I think of the assets, I think of a professor of mine at BC, where for some godforsaken reason I got stuck into a geology course, of which I had no interest whatsoever. But I ended up learning a good deal. And Father Skian's parting message to us, knowing that he'd be lucky if there were one or two geologists in the whole damn crowd, was that geology is important for all of us, and mark my words, and I forget the number of years he used. He probably thought it would be over by, I think he's hit it right on the head. He said, before we know it, water in New England, because of our geology, will be as valuable as oil. So here we are with the opportunity to purchase and preserve for the inhabitants of Hingham and the benefit of all the customers who are receiving this water, to get such a valuable asset and control it locally, not have it controlled by international investors. So the assets we're looking at are extraordinarily important. And frankly, I would put Hingham's record with regard to conservation and preservation of natural resources up against that of Eversource any day of the week. Now, with regard to the governance and this sort of rate worries, we would be required, the town of Hingham, you all or your successors as water commissioners, are required by law to treat all equally situated
Right.
customers the same.
Right.
So if the water commissioners have made a decision on rates that outrages every customer in Hull, that decision will have equal application to Hingham customers. And this place will be a lot hotter than it is today. And when it
Hard to
comes to
believe.
complaining about rates, if you asked me, what's your preference? Do you want to go through a regulatory system with all the administrative law complications and issues of when the regulated capture the regulators and all the rest of it, and spend thousands and thousands of dollars disputing whether you should pay that much? Or would you rather have electoral control over the person who set the rate and whether that person will have a job when it comes time for the next rate setting? And I think local control in these circumstances would be highly beneficial. And then finally, though I don't necessarily share all of the comments that were made about the new owner of Aquarion, particularly with respect to customer satisfaction levels. But the idea that we're somehow giving up professional management and taking a flyer on our own, God knows how those selectmen would screw this thing up. That sort of argument is very misleading. First of all, I would ask, who the hell knows how Eversource is going to screw it up, since they're getting into running a water company for the first time? So as far as I'm concerned, were Hingham to decide to buy the assets, we'd be buying it from a controlling entity who only had a year in the business already. Secondly, granting that Aquarion runs a good water company, at least for purposes of the discussion, they're not the only ones who can do that. The company has quite justifiably, proudly proclaimed that it won an award this past year for its water quality. The award it won, it was actually one of 18 other communities that won the same award in the same category, 16 of which were publicly owned and operated. So the implication that only private ownership can deliver good quality water is, I think, completely unsupported by all of the evidence we have. In particular, when I look at a map and I see all of those other communities that are doing it, and I hear what sounds to me like an argument that we shouldn't do this because somehow it's beyond our capabilities. Hingham can't do this. And I think Hingham can't do it, and every other community in Massachusetts can. Something here doesn't register. And frankly, as a long-standing resident of the town, with some familiarity about how we operate, I take affront at the suggestion this is beyond us. I think you have outlined a governance system that would work. I would be happy to participate in all the debate and discussion and tweak it to get it exactly right. But I hope the town won't lose sight of the fact that this is probably our last opportunity to commandeer and own this precious resource for ourselves, for the future, and for all our grandchildren, and all of the future inhabitants of a town that, after all, has celebrated 375 years of existence. And the snakes don't scare me anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.